early cognitive scientists sort of took it for granted that your model of where you are now wasn't actually a model, it was just reality, because you look out in the world and you can see the reality and there you are. But that's not true, because you're as constrained with regards to the information that you have at hand about the present just as much as you are about the future or the past, then your conceptualization of the present is also a model, just like your conceptualization of the future. And the reason that's so important to know is that if, when you're moving from point A to point B, you make an error, the error could be that you've predicted the future or construed the future inaccurately, but it could also be that you've construed the present or the past inaccurately, and what that means is that you didn't start from where you thought you were starting. You know, and that happens, for example, that'll happen if you're moving forward and you discover that you have weaknesses of one form or another that you didn't know about when you made the original plan. And that what that means is that your current conception of yourself is sufficiently inaccurate so that you can't move from that conception to the future desired state without error. And the other reason I'm telling you that is because what that also helps you understand is how broad the domain of potential error is when something you don't understand happens. Because not only does it throw the future that you're conceptualizing into doubt, it also throws the conceptualization of you as a being in the present into doubt. And it's not obvious at all when you do the initial search in which of those domains you're going to find the error, or where. And so error is a more complex problem than the cognitive scientists who were interested in the comparator models of cybernetic processing had ever conceptualized. Because they kind of thought in behaviorist terms, which is, well, the world just presents itself to you as it is. So you're not going to be making any errors of fundamental perception, you just might be making errors of prediction. But that's far too optimistic. Now, we also know that this fundamental narrative framework, which gives you a sense of the value of your current position and a destination, because you're a moving creature, you're an active, living creature that's interacting with the world and transforming it all the time. There are also constraints on which the narrative that you're going to conceptualize and act out can exist. And the constraints are, well, they're Piagetian constraints in some sense. Whatever it is that you're doing has to support you while you're doing it. That's constraint number one. And that means that the path you take has to fulfill whatever constitute the list of necessities that you can't move forward without. And some of those we think of as basic needs, like you have to breathe and you have to eat and you have to have sufficient water and you have to have shelter and all those things. And there's the parameters within which those needs can be fulfilled are pretty broad, but so you can't think of it necessarily as a simple problem or that there are simple solutions, but there's still obvious constraints. And not only do you have to fulfill all those fundamental obligations to yourself, but you have to do it in a manner that's relatively non-contradictory, so that while you're pursuing one, it doesn't decrease the chance that you're going to obtain another. And you have to do it in a way that the way you do it now doesn't compromise you doing it next week or next month or next year. That's where delay of gratification comes in. And then you also have to do it in a way that fulfills your basic needs in a non-contradictory manner over different spans of time and space while other people are doing the same thing. And so you think, see, that's a very, very tight set of constraints. And so the idea that this narrative could be anything is wrong, because it has to serve many masters simultaneously. And I'm not saying there aren't multiple solutions to that, just like there are multiple ways of playing or winning a game. But it's a constrained set of possibilities. So, okay. Now, the next proposition is that when you're moving from point A to point B, there's two or three classes of things that can happen. One is things that you don't want to have happen, and that obviously is symbolically represented by the little blue unhappy face. And then there are positive things that can happen, and the positive things are twofold in nature. They have two fundamental elements, and behaviorists never tell you this. So it's one of the fundamental flaws in behavioral theory. Things that indicate that you're moving towards a desired goal are positive. That's classic, sophisticated behavioral theory. Those are incentive rewards, because an incentive reward indicates to you that a consumatory reward is forthcoming. And there are different neurobiological systems that underlie those two types of reward. Consumatory reward basically produces satisfaction, whereas incentive reward produces excitement, hope, and movement forward. And it's actually the kind of reward that you like better, which is weird, you know, because you'd think that the most potent reward would be consumatory reward. But people will work harder for incentive reward than they will for consumatory reward. And that's one of the things that makes people very peculiar creatures. And I think part of the reason for that is that the incentive reward system is part of the broader seeking system, as Jaak Panksepp describes it. And so, because the incentive reward system not only tells you that a reward, like an expected reward, might be forthcoming, it also tells you that an unexpected reward might be forthcoming. And the reason that's so important is because you actually view the world that you don't understand partly through the lens of threat, because if something that you don't understand happens, it might be dangerous, but also through the lens of possibility, because if something you don't understand happens, that means there's an indeterminate probability of reward. And like, these things turn out to be extremely important. So for example, if you're in a long-term sexual relationship with a person, the degree to which that relationship might be sexually pleasurable will decline. And part of the reason for that is that the novelty disappears, because novelty enhances incentive reward. And so one of the things that you can do to maintain the romance in a relationship is to mix some novelty in, however you might be able to do that. And that usually involves playing in one form or another and a certain amount of creativity. So it's not a trivial issue, it's an important issue. So anyways, when you're moving forward and you encounter something that indicates that you're going to achieve your goal, the other thing that's happening at the same time is that the fact that that thing appears validates your entire perceptual scheme, right? So A, you're moving forward to the goal, but B, the whole plan that you're using to construe the world in order so that you can act, so that you can move towards the goal, is also sufficiently right, and that's a big source of incentive reward.